Hello, everyone. Welcome to another NIRSA Ideas in Motion virtual roundtable. If you found the Zoom link, that means that you are at the Young Professionals Roundtable Part 2 here in May. So we are your facilitators today. My name is Tom Giles. I'm a coordinator for competitive sports down at FIU, which is in Miami, and I am joined by my Zoom neighbor.
Me, I'm Cheyanne. I'm currently, for my last day, the graduate assistant of fitness at the University of Mississippi.
Congrats, Cheyanne. Awesome.
Thanks. Graduation's tomorrow.
Ooh. Yeah, chat. Let's give congratulations to Cheyanne. She earned that.
Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. So I know that most of you have probably heard this spiel a ton of times, but just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, this session is being recorded and will be posted on the website. Both the audio and visual is going to be recorded, as well as the public chat. So if you're dropping any links or comments into the chat, that will also be posted as a transcript so that you can find it. So all of those resources are going to continue to live on the NIRSA website after this session is done. You were all muted upon entry into this room, but you are free to unmute yourself if you have something to say. But you can use the chat for questions and comments. But if you do choose to speak or type, we just ask if you quickly introduce yourself, give yourself your institution name, then that just aids in people following up and giving some additional information or helping out in future topics. So what we do have for today is a webinar. We do not have like a lecture from Cheyanne and I. We want this to be a conversation. So it's much more of a roundtable. So we're really excited to have everyone's kind of opinions meld together to really enhance this conversation. So we're going to need people to respect all opinions and concerns. Everyone is dealing with this in a lot of different ways, and May 8th has coronavirus in a lot of different places across the country. So everyone is kind of dealing with it the best they can in the circumstances they're at. So to facilitate that discussion, we just need a no judgment space, which I know that NIRSA members and the people on this call are absolutely capable of. So quickly before we get started, sort of like last time, we have a little virtual meet and greet. So if you want to drop the following information in your chat so we can all kind of get to know each other virtually, just your name, your institution, your title, how long you've been in your field. And then my random question generator app on my phone gave me this question today. So I thought it'd be good to add. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be? For me, during quarantine, it has reaffirmed that hot dogs are the way to my soul. So I just would eat hot dogs for the rest of my life because they're incredible.
This is so ironic. We were just talking about food before this call.
I know, it's so weird.
Mine would be waffles. I love a good Belgian waffle.
Okay, Belgian waffle.
Like I have a cool waffle maker and everything. Oh yeah.
Powdered sugar or no powdered sugar?
Butter and syrup. Cold syrup though, cold syrup. Or syrup, whatever you all prefer to say.
Wonderful. Seeing a lot of pizza in the chat. Feel like I might have made a mistake.
Pizza is a good one.
Wonderful.
Peanut butter.
I'm also getting a lot of private and public shaming for choosing hot dogs, but I'm going to stand by my choice.
Ramen? That one's interesting.
Ramen's a great choice.
Giancarlo, what flavor ramen would it be?
Well, I mean, if I'm having that for the rest of my life, I'm hopefully different types of flavors. So it's not just the same one, but tonkatsu like to do for the first couple of years until I get sick of it.
Smart.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, we can continue to have people drop that information in the chat, and I didn't mean to start any food-based discussions that are going to alienate people from each other, but hopefully the chat also allows for people to come together over their food choices as well. I'm getting a lot of hate for hot dogs. So NIRSA reached out to Cheyanne and I to host the second part of the discussion, primarily because there was an overwhelming response from you all on wanting to see this topic hosted again. There was a lot of very interesting topics for concern, so we actually had to whittle them down to something that we could host in one setting. And so we have three broad categories of topics that were set up for coverage. They broadly fall into work-life balance, networking and developing as a young pro, and then overwhelmingly the response that NIRSA received the highest amount from is tips and tricks for those of us who are future young pros. So GAs that are going into the field, or people who are interested. So yes, Cheyanne is pointing towards herself. So people like Cheyanne. So we're going to try and make sure that we can give time to each of these, but there's really not an agenda. We just want to cover these topics and kind of see where the conversation flows. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here in a second, but we're going to start off with the work-life balance dynamic. And I just kind of want to pose a question to the groups. Is basically we're talking about a lot of these Zoom calls have talked about how work-life balance has been changed a lot since we have gone remote. I just wanted to pose a question to the chat of, has anyone seen a difference in communication from their direct reports, or have they changed their communication styles to those they have reporting to them? So I guess I can start because I'm part of the person that submitted this topic, and that a lot of us in the feedback form is that they are working different hours now, and their direct report is technically not working at the same time. And so, like for me, my supervisor is now contacting me at much more odd hours. So I'm getting contacted at 6, 7 p.m. at night, which is kind of after the workday, or I'm getting contacted at the ungodly hour of like 9 in the morning, which is not when I'm typically in the office, as I work 9 to 12. So just trying to see if there's anybody else out there that's trying to navigate this kind of always being on call life that is work from home.
I had personally, my name is Greg Tack and I'm with Quinnipiac University. And I had worked at odd times before this started to happen. And now I work at odd times, and I also get responses from my bosses at odd times. So it sort of meshed together when we'd have almost no overlap before. So it almost improved the time. I mean, I was always in the office from say about noon to 5 when we were at campus, but now the noon to 5 time is almost obsolete, and the time we mostly communicate is at night, or like you said, on 7 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, I had to set my alarm a couple times. I did not like that at all.
So Greg, is that primarily communicating through like text messages or phone, or is it through more traditional mediums?
We have a space called Slack, and we'll use that, and then we'll also use email.
Wonderful.
Sometimes we'll use Zoom.
I'm kind of in the same boat as Colin and Crystal. Like, I'm used to being able to pop into my supervisor's office and spitball or brainstorm, kind of have that conversation and check in. And now it's like they're very scheduled, and they're now hour and a half versus like I just have a 5-minute question kind of thing.
Yes, Colin, the random, I have a random question pop-in is now gone. But is anybody here hosting virtual office hours? Just an open Zoom meeting with a public link in which anyone can drop in. Is anyone doing that? Dominique, would you like to speak to? Oh, Eric, please go ahead.
Hi, Eric Ashad at Rowan University. I actually did host virtual office hours for a few weeks, but didn't seem to get very much luck in those. Honestly, I just had like 1 or 2 people pop in over the course of 3 weeks. I found better success in sending out a Google form with just a big questionnaire on how people are doing. And on there, I had a little question that said, are you interested in myself or a GA reaching out to set up a meeting? And I definitely got a much better response through that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
This is Courtney Brown at UGA. We did a couple, kind of like Eric, open office hours once we were finally like told by our business office that we could do that. And kind of same as Eric, we had like, and it was open. Our whole facility staff is about 150, and we had like 5 hop on. But then we did like a program assistant specific check-in and had all but one of our PAs show up, including incoming. So I've kind of found a few, I feel like if you break it down by position, it seems to be more successful. I'm looking to do one with my event team next week. And they seem to be a lot more on board with that. So maybe for those that have bigger teams, consider like breaking it down by position. It might make it less intimidating.
Thank you, Courtney.
Dominique, I have a question for you about how you got to that mutual agreement with your supervisor. Did you start that conversation, and what did it look like? Or do you just have a rock star supervisor who brought that up to you?
Foremost, she is a rock star. Yes, and I think all of our supervisors are rock stars respectively. But no, so when I came into the field of the professional last year, she had already warned me that in July it'd probably be a little different because she may or may not have been accepting a promotion. So she wasn't a director, and then she became an executive director. And so with the executive director title, she therefore had more responsibilities. So pretty much my first like year, she was pretty much right in front of me or around the corner from me for like 3 months, and then everything else I had to like learn on the fly or find somebody else or so on and so forth. So we've always had this kind of agreement of work hour communication, and anything aside from the work hours is super urgent. And my areas happen to be club sports and summer camps, and so I knew that if I was getting contacted after those work hours, then it was important. Thanks, Cassie. I saw that in the chat. But no, she, like, especially during these times, the university is breaking down like subcommittees in order to help plan more efficiently for the university. And so she's a part of that now. And most of the time she's in meetings, and then we every week we have a communication for at least an hour. And so everything that we've had to communicate, we've always communicated ever since she was my supervisor. And so the only adjustment really during the COVID times was knowing when she would be unable to be to talk to me, or if I was doing something else as well. So ever since the start, we've always had good communication and had that transparency with each other. It was just the means of getting used to all of that now.
So thank you for sharing that. That's almost a perfect segue into the next topic, which is setting boundaries. Courtney, if I can put you on the spot, could you kind of share that experience about how you were able to kind of set those boundaries where work-life balance, COVID-19 has actually been a net positive for your work-life balance?
Yeah, so sorry, there's 2 Courtneys here, so I was making sure I was me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I often have a tendency to stay in the office, whether it's for like, you know, just chatting or hanging out, or if it's doing something work related. So I think being able to kind of be in a space where there's no programming around me or any other distractions, it's a lot easier to, one, get things done in a timely manner. So during my typical work hours, and then I shut my computer at 5. And after that, I am done for the workday, and that's really helped my personal life and personal relationships in my life as well. And also one of the things that I did that's been really good for me is taking my email notifications off of my phone as well. So that way I don't have a tendency to look at emails or anything. Like, students know if they need me, they can like reach out to me via text or group me if it's urgent. But I also try to set those boundaries with them to just let them know that I'm here for you, but just be respectful of the hours that we work as well. Like, getting group me messages at 2 a.m. is not always the best.
Absolutely. Thank you, Courtney. Just quick show of hands for everyone else that's on the call in the chat. Who else has a close their laptop at 5 kind of policy? Like, this is the time of day. Oh, wow. Lots of hands. I am in the minority.
That's how I felt too. I was very overwhelmed with those hands.
Wonderful. That's awesome to hear. So we're
I
seeing
mean, you
that there's a
definitely
lot
owe
of
it to yourself to like know when to shut it down. And especially with the uncertainty of things, like, you know, you can shut your laptop off at whatever time you're supposed to. There's not really a pressure to continue on with the day, unless it's like, you know, working with students in their own times and so on and so forth. But I would agree with Courtney in that this quarantine has also helped me with my work-life balance.
To kind of echo what somebody else had said, and by the way, Dimitri Lahanis, Arizona State. I mean, yes, it's super important, but again, when I'll get random messages from my direct and my executive director, just like to do something for them. Like we had to prepare some work for like our VP's office that needed to be due like the next day. So they basically gave us like a 12-hour window. We had to do work. So essentially, I think it's what's really good about our field and like the work that we're doing is that we're always flexible. But that work-life balance part has definitely been increased in terms of finding your own time to build in like when you can work out or when you're getting out of your house for that walk or, you know, hanging with your dogs and things like that. So that 5 p.m. thing, it's definitely a little bit more emphasized now, but you know, if anything that comes after that, it's always going to be the more important thing.
Now, to kind of pivot, thank you for sharing that, Dimitri. To kind of pivot, I think Cassie in the chat brought up a really good point. For all the GAs that are on the call, do you have a strict time that you're doing schoolwork and work? So you kind of have like, I'm only doing schoolwork from 10 to noon, and then I'm going to shut my laptop. Nope, Cheyanne is shaking her head no.
So I tried that, having had my NIRSA role this year, my graduate assistantship, and grad school. I tried to make like NIRSA time, school time, work time, but personally for me, it didn't work. I was not someone who liked to do my homework at home or my NIRSA stuff at home. I had my office and I was comfortable in there, so it all kind of blended together for me. But I know a lot of other people kind of work differently.
I mean, hi, I'm Cassie. I'm from Youngstown State University. I have found that like I can keep a work schedule really well and know that, okay, like 9 to 2 is when I'm doing stuff for the rec center. But then like classes, I know that I have all this other time that I can like do it or like when I have those due dates by, so that it's really just kind of dependent on what I felt like doing or how much like screen time I've needed to use for work and trying to balance that as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Cassie.
Go ahead, Gia. Sorry.
I'm Gia. I'm from Central Washington University, and I am the complete opposite of Cheyanne. I had to create like time where I was doing my work and doing my schoolwork, because when I was intermingling them, it was not working out for me at all, especially right now, like being online with everything. And then like just my mental health was really declining, because being in front of my computer screen for like 3 to 4 hours every morning for work and then an additional like 5 to 6 for school every day was really, really hard. And so I incorporated like a time in the middle of the day where I wasn't doing work or school, and then as well as like a time at night where I wasn't, and just like completely like putting my phone down, my computer screen away, and having no screen time at all, because I just like needed to get away from that. But I was having a really hard time not responding. Like I'd hear my emails go off or hear something go off, and I was like instantly going to them. But then it created this habit with my staff that like I would be responsive at any time. And so then they would contact me at weird hours. I would respond, and it was like almost like a toxic relationship. And so I had to cut that off. And it was really hard to rebuild that standard because they were so used to me responding so quickly. But like I had to create respect for myself for that, and also give my time to like know that I'm a student before I'm an employee, and get my schoolwork done, because I'm an undergrad and that's like what I am in the game for right now. And so my job comes second for me as a priority.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think one of the things that Tom and I talked about when we were planning this call is that as a graduate assistant, you have your supervisor there kind of looking over your shoulder to help make sure that you're managing your time, to make sure that my supervisor used to say, Cheyanne, go home. You've been here all day. Like go to your house and take care of things at home. But as a professional, that might not be the case. You have to set those your own boundaries and manage your own time and tell yourself to go home. And I know the kind of person I am, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do with that.
I think one of the better things we've had is from higher up my bosses to turn in a report every day of what we all did. And so I have to go every day and say, okay, these are the things I'm going to do. He has to send it in by a certain time, so I have to send it to him by the morning. And then that's kind of my to-do list. And then I kind of at the end of the day plan for the next day so that I know, like, okay, I still have to fill tomorrow, or I didn't get this done today. And it's honestly something I hope I can keep doing myself to kind of keep me on track, and then also kind of spread things out through the week and plan a little bit better. Because I always kind of made makeshift to-do lists, but like sending it to my boss, I'm like, oh, I said I'm going to do this. I have to make sure I do this. So that's been really cool and helpful. And I can kind of scroll through and see like, wow, I've done all of these things too. When one thing isn't working right, it's like, okay, something else did. So kind of a little bit more reassuring to see all of those things too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tess. And it kind of is a perfect setup for the last point we want to talk about, this work-life balance, which is for some of us, reopening is now on that distant horizon. And there's a chance that some of us in the distant future or not so distant future might be going back into work. And obviously we're calling it this new normal. So the setting this boundaries talk and kind of the work style that you've developed, I know a lot of us are looking at how they don't want to go back to how work was. They want to kind of take what they've learned from work from home and transition it back into the office. So does anyone have any strategies of kind of how they're trying to take what they're doing to their office life in the future?
Hi, I'm Greg from Quinnipiac, and it was the bosses and I were talking about it, and they were saying that we would have sort of more organized office hours when we got back, and you come from this time to this time, and then you go home, as in you set a strict boundary for yourself. I was one that would come to campus in the morning to watch practices and do work on the side, and also stay late and watch practices. So they would say, you need to set a boundary schedule. I didn't realize how much I needed sleep until I came home and had plenty of it available to me.
Sleep is the best, Greg.
Oh, it is. I didn't realize that. I sleep 8 hours a day now. It's wonderful.
I have a nap on my calendar, work from home life. It's great.
I wouldn't be opposed to putting a nap. My boss has a couch in his office. I hypothetically could nap for. It looks very comfy.
Hypothetically, of course. Hypothetically.
Of course.
Any other strategies or ideas that we want to bring back to the office, or things that we want to change once we return?
I think this ties in nicely to Corinne's question in the chat about like what we've learned and the silver lining about how we've benefited in this. And there's been a lot of awesome things said in there. So hopefully those things that you're taking away from this are things that you're going to bring back with you to the office.
One thing that we've talked about is extending virtual office hours when we do return back to campus for students that have a question about a form or something, or like a colleague that works at a different facility, being able to check in with them a lot more easily. I think that would be a great resource for extending the virtual office hours or having like a space for that.
Thank you for sharing that, Jules.
Virtual office hours sound really nice because you don't have to walk anywhere. Like students can just be in their apartment or their dorm and just go on Zoom. Like I hope they continue the Zoom option for schools because I know you have to pay for it.
Wonderful. All right, unless there is anything else somebody wants to share at this time, we're gonna kind of move into that next big theme, which is networking and developing as a young pro. And this is a topic that is very interesting because as Cheyanne so perfectly did this and totally on plan, she kind of talked about the show must go on Tuesday, and a lot of it had to do with that whole networking piece. So Cheyanne, would you like to take this away?
Sure. Yeah, so I kind of wrote an article on Tuesday that talked about how every year going to a conference and getting that networking and professional development experience is easily the best week of my entire year. And so I was really disappointed when we didn't get to do that and celebrate in Phoenix. But I think that a lot of virtual options have come up to continue to do that and have created what I've considered the best month of my year. I'm going to talk about my friend Dimitri, who's out in Arizona, but when this all started, he's someone that I look up to as a mentor. And one of the things that I did was I FaceTimed him, and I hadn't FaceTimed him and been able to talk about work in a while. We both had more time to connect on like with each other and those pieces. And I've been able to continue to do that with people all across the country that I didn't have time to do before. So I think that this is a huge thing because we feel like we're missing a lot of it, but we have to make those opportunities now.
So absolutely. I mean, kind of throwing it to some of our young pros on the chat and on the call. Just if you have any advice or tips and tricks that you've had with networking and developing as a young pro, both before COVID-19 and kind of during COVID-19, we would love to hear your advice.
Drake Bell, University of Arizona. So I'm in my 3rd year as a professional staff member. And one thing that I did as a GA was at conferences, I tried really hard to meet other individuals from other institutions. And one thing that's just been very helpful moving forward was I update a lot of those individuals on when I move positions or when I'm looking at a new work team or committee that I'm on. So Damon Pryor at Toledo is somebody that I'll email once or twice a semester just to update on what I'm doing. And I've never worked with him. I've only been involved with him at conferences. And so I think just utilizing those resources, there's a ton of people, even in this chat, like I've met Thomas at a bunch of conferences and on work teams. Ali Bogard's in here. And so we're on a work team for NIRSA too. So just like really maintaining those relationships. And I think like what Cheyanne said is you really need to be the one that reaches out to those individuals. I went to a talk recently on just like chronic loneliness and its prevalence in millennial and Gen Z populations, and that it's, if you're wondering why somebody's not reaching out to you, it's like kind of on you to be that bridge to help make that relationship that you're looking for. So I love hearing that Cheyanne just like FaceTime Dimitri. I think with phones and group me's, you can have those chat messages of those young professionals or older professionals. So I have a IU group chat that has every single GA that's gone through IU's program and their assistant directors. And I think that's just something that really helps with this connection across the nation. So we're in Arizona, Texas, Wisconsin, St. Louis, Indiana. And so you can really get like a quick snapshot just through a text message as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Drake. And I think
I want to
Cheyanne,
add,
please.
Sorry, he said something about roundtables and all of you people that are on here. If someone says something interesting that you find, like asks a good question that's been on your mind, private chat them and ask them for their email. I just did it to Gia. I was like, Gia, what's your email? I want to connect with you more. Just grab their email and have a follow-up conversation after. Like, everyone's here for the same reason. So don't be afraid to just slide in those Zoom DMs, you know?
Never thought I would hear that.
You're welcome.
But
Happy Friday.
yeah. But I also kind of want to call out to Ali, if you're comfortable with sharing. Can you kind of speak more about this applying for the committees and how they're always looking for new people?
Yeah, I can totally speak to that. Being on quite a few over, I guess my time in NIRSA, probably the last 5 years or so, and on those review teams, like we're always looking for a fresh set of eyes. If you are, if you've already been super involved, we're usually like, okay, this person, maybe we can put their strength somewhere else, but so-and-so has a really awesome experience and application, and we haven't seen them on a committee before, so we're going to place them there. For me, gosh, it has gotten me a job. It has gotten me to my current Region 6 representative position. Yeah, I think I just posted something else too. Nobody is ever going to turn you away if you have a question or, excuse me, need support at all. Everybody in our profession is willing to help you and wants to see you grow. So yeah, if you if somebody's presentation or something really inspires you, reach out and tell them. Victoria Lopez Herrera is one of those specific people for me, and Women Leading Women pre-conference in Denver 2017, NIRSA 2018, gosh, sorry. And yeah, I mean, I totally needed to hear her presentation at that time, and reached out to her at the conference, and one of my mentors connected us in person. And Victoria is one of my mentors now. And so don't be afraid to reach out, ask the questions, have somebody who use somebody you know who has a really good network and say, hey, I'm applying for this job. Do you know anybody here? Or I'm looking to do this. Do you know anyone who's working on that? Use your network. Yeah.
Thank you, Allie. And I also want to call out Courtney's comment in the chat. And obviously we're talking about how we're on the Zoom call right now. And Cheyanne and I were joking that beforehand, there's a person from Nursa on the call, there's me and Cheyanne, and we have 3 different time zones, and we're representing the entire country on the Zoom call. Now is a really good time to stretch your wings. And if you're in a particular region, you get to meet people from other regions. But I want to add on to that in that I work in competitive sports and Cheyanne works in fitness. It's really easy for us to just network with people who do what we do, because there's that instant transaction of, hey, you can give something back to me, like you have job specific material. But I want to call out back to Drake's comment. Drake and I don't do the same job, but we've worked together at multiple events, and I'm not working in aquatics and he doesn't work in competitive sports, but he's a resource for me should I have any questions about NIRSA at large. And it's something that I really do cherish. And we don't talk very often, but he was an awesome person to plan with. And those kind of collaborations that go outside of your job role are the ones that you can potentially use to the greatest extent, because ultimately all of NIRSA is on the same team. So knowing more people on your team does help.
Yeah, sorry, Thomas. I deleted my social media last year, so I don't talk to you as much.
It's totally fine. The Snapchat group just got 1 person smaller.
Creating a virtual spelling bee? That sounds fun. How'd you do? You're muted, girl. There you go.
Sorry, I'm good. I'm in a car. It went pretty well. It was full credit to Gerard Davis at Ohio State. He put it together, but it was a fun way. It was right around the same time as the annual conference, and it was a good way for us to meet people that we didn't know. So there was a really diverse group of people. We expanded our networks, connected afterwards, but it was really fun. I did all right. I did not win, but I did not lose. That's all I will say.
If they would have asked me to spell definitely, I would have been out for the count.
Yeah, and another one is obviously the Flix sock bracket. For all of those that are not aware, someone could probably drop that link in the chat. There's the Socks of NIRSA bracket, which the annual conference is obviously a time that many of us sock fans like to show off our funky socks, and now there's a great bracket, so you can vote for your favorites. And I've actually met some people just through their choice. Thank you, Shayna, for dropping that. I've met a lot of people through this competition as well, just because we both love crazy socks. Anything's a networking opportunity.
One thing that I know I'm not a young pro and I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry, y'all. One thing that my supervisor encouraged me to do was go seek different association stuff or professional development outside of campus recreation. So getting in with higher ed stuff, reading some of those articles that I don't just naturally gravitate towards. Cause I'm all in NIRSA over here. So for me to have to read something from NASPA or do a workshop that they have online is something that I was encouraged to do.
Michael Adiemo, Sam Houston State University. One thing I've quite really enjoyed down here at SAM is not just meeting people from our field, but meeting people from different aspects of student affairs, as well as, the networking that goes into that. A lot of people at our LSC, our student center, know a lot of people from commerce, which was my undergrad. So it's fun, like finding those little connections there.
Thank you, Michael. Great point. Any other kind of creative ways to network or tips and tricks for developing your network as a young pro?
Shayna Kessler, Central Washington University. One thing I will share with you all that I will never forget from my first NIRSA conferences is how intimidating it can be when you go somewhere that big with so many people who have the same interest as you, and you might only know the people from your department or from your region. So keep in mind, we were all new at some point. We might seem cliquey at times. That's definitely an issue we have on occasion in NIRSA. But push through all of that and make us recognize you and know who you are. My NIRSA mentor from 9 years ago was the one who said he made a point of going and introducing themselves to people like the NIRSA board of directors and foundation members and people who were so high up the ladder because he wasn't going to give them the option to not know who he was. And that was life-changing for me as an introvert, which for those of you who know me, you'll probably be surprised that I am an introvert, but I am a textbook introvert. I am so uncomfortable in social situations, and what I learned from that experience was, so is everybody else. So go and rub elbows with people, make them notice who you are, and get on our radars, because for those of us who are professionals, we don't know everything, we don't know everyone, but we want to know you.
Definitely what she said, especially with the annual conference. I mean, granted, we didn't have it this year, but when you get like your regional conferences, your state workshops, your annual conferences, volunteer for everything, because when you're at the foundation table or you're working with the foundation, you're trying to like get donations, you're talking to everybody. And I mean, literally everyone. I've probably met some of the like more notable faces, some of the honor award winners, a lot of people in there. So solely because of those volunteer hours. So if you're just a session monitor, you're going to meet that entire panel of people. Then you meet their friends and so on and so forth. And you're just seeing them for years to come. So like, that's kind of like the beauty of that 1 degree of separation in NIRSA. You're going to meet everybody at some point or another.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously the chat will also be saved, but there's a lot of really good information being posted in the chat right now. A lot of pros are making their information available. So when this gets posted, if you want to copy it now or visit it later, there's a lot of really good opportunities that are appearing in that chat. So I guess last call for any other networking or networking ideas as a young pro before we transition to our third and final topic. Going once. Going twice. Sold. All right, so with the last around 20-ish minutes that we have left, I wanted to dedicate a good chunk of time to the kind of the reason that this second part of the roundtable even got off the ground. NIRSA received a lot of feedback on this topic of tips and tricks for people who want to transition from being that student to being a pro. And with the special big caveat in the sense that this kind of discussion normally has a lot of topics, but now we throw COVID-19 into the mix and it's a totally different ballgame. So we might not have the answers specifically for right now, but we want to talk about more generally about how we can transition from that GA to a pro, but also some tips and tricks for the here and now as well. So kind of opening it up to our young pros on the chat. Cheyanne needs advice.
Help me. Help all of us. So, okay, I know that you can't help me with a job search. I get that because this is crazy and none of you have done this before. None of us have done this before. But like Tom brought up some really good points like in our conversations before this about like sometimes you're the person that gets asked to go across campus because like something might be happening later at night and all these things I didn't think of that might happen to me when I become a professional. So please, what to expect when not expecting, hopefully having a job.
I think, go ahead, please.
Tom, go ahead.
No, Tom, please.
Okay. All right. I would say that, okay, I applied to like 40 different schools on campuses to like 10, so on and so forth. But there was only one campus that when I left, I felt like I had fun. I felt like I belonged, and that was YSU, and that's where I'm at right now. everywhere else that I visited did make me realize like, oh, like I shouldn't have said that, or I should have marketed myself a little bit better here. But none of the other interviews that I had made me feel like I belonged, that I was welcome there. It wasn't until I got my first offer at YSU that I realized like, oh, like I forced myself to be this person that they wanted me to be, not who I wanted to be. And then when I interviewed at Youngstown, that was completely different. And that is what changed the game for me. And so like, don't settle, you know, I applied to multiple jobs, but I accepted the one and only. And make sure that everything that you want is considered. I hope you can hear me, since my internet is unstable. So like if you're considering political climate of the state or campus climate even, culture of the department, people that you may know through the grapevine, it's NIRSA after all, campus rec, everyone knows everybody. So yeah, just do like your little bit of due diligence and make sure that wherever you're applying to or wherever you interview at is a place that you actually want to be. Don't waste your time if you're thinking an application is something you could do but you don't want to do. You know, make sure everything that you're doing is intentional and with purpose, and you want to get something out of that experience.
Wonderful points. Thank you, Dom.
Stephanie, are you naturally the kind of person who asks a lot of questions? So my current first year graduate assistant is the kind of person who is constantly asking questions and needs a lot of input. So that comes natural for her. Whereas like, I'm not such a questioner, like I kind of just accept things. So are you naturally that? And if you are or are not, how did you navigate that?
Hi, super awkward. I'm in an airport, but we're gonna go for it. So I wouldn't say I'm normally the person that asks questions. I don't like to show that I don't know what's going on or what I'm doing. And it's like after a few days, I realized I just had to do it. And Corinne's probably laughing as I'm talking because there were days where I'd come and ask her questions and she's like, you know, this is something you're allowed to ask your supervisor, right? So it just, after you feel comfortable and get comfortable, you can go for it. I mean, it was things as small as like, can you help me work through these benefits? Or am I allowed to park in this lot on campus? Things like that. It feels small, but at the end of the day, people understand that you're a young professional. And sometimes I would frame it like that as well. Like, as a first year professional, I've never dealt with this before. And I was just honestly surprised with the grace that I got, and people were so willing to help.
Yeah, and I want to echo what Stephanie just said. For all the GAs or students that are on this call, none of the pros that are on this job know 100% of their job because it's always changing. And so all of us are just trying to learn and adapt. So questions are your friend. If you come into your first day of your job and you think you know everything, you're setting yourself up for failure. So we have to be adaptable. We have to have those questions. We don't know everything, but we're always looking to learn. That's what NIRSA is all about. So thank you for sharing that, Stephanie.
And I'll just chime in really quick to echo that a little bit. I think that's a benefit of what we're going through right now, is that we've been opened up to this like vulnerability, right? So we're seeing the insides of people's homes on video calls, and lots of people are uncertain about things. And so there's a lot of transparency, and there's a kind of a big opportunity here for vulnerability to be embraced. And so as a young professional coming into a new role, I would just say take advantage of that. And people are going to be used to that, and that's going to be sort of the mindset that they have when bringing on new people as well. So, and then I just wanted to circle back to one of the things you said kind of initially, Tom, when you brought up this last topic, which was about how to prepare, especially if you're, looking for jobs right now, and with freezes and stuff like that, not having a lot of certainty there. And I would just say that I think what you could do as a second year GA that maybe is going to be having a couple months of a break, do something with those couple months. So when you are applying for jobs and there is an opportunity, they can say, okay, well, what did you do, with your time off? And if you're like, well, I just was at home with family and didn't do much, that might not carry as much weight as, well, I took the initiative to either start learning a new language, or I made a goal to read X number of books. And or I worked on, creating all this content for professional development for student employees. And so I think that those are things you can do to set yourself apart. And that mindset also doesn't start as a professional. That mindset starts when you enter an assistantship. So I just had to call both of my incoming GAs to tell them that I had to push back their start date until August. And the first thing one of them said was, what are some things that I still can work on or prepare for? And so that mindset is what's going to set you apart in the long run when you're competing for these positions with your peers. So I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you. Caroline Mashburn, can I put you on the spot? Can you discuss that topic in the chat a little bit more?
Sure. I have terrible Wi-Fi, so I'm sorry it's going in and out.
Oh no. Carol.
Yeah, this was something you don't really, I'm telling you, my Wi-Fi terrible. Courtney Brown knows from our book club meetings.
Yeah, it's real bad, Mash.
Oh, sorry, y'all.
It's all good. The comment was excellent. So check it out in the chat. But we can almost leapfrog because it's a similar vein. Maria, would you be willing to speak on your comment as well? It's kind of in that same idea.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria, and I work at Princeton, and I'm also a new professional. Thomas, you're on our call during the virtual career week when we talked about going from a student to a professional. One of the things that I talked about during that session and really harped on was like learning that coming from a space where you have mentors who are looking out for you all the time, like that changes when you become a pro. I expected a full out orientation explaining about the school, the culture, what my position would look like. My position was new, so they never had someone to do marketing and staff development. And with that whole experience, it took about me 2 months to ask to meet with the director and senior admin and say like, what do you expect from me in terms of like, where can I find the balance between still learning about the new place, but making sure I'm still doing my job? I think that's kind of like where you can feel you don't know how much you can do while you're still learning about what they've been processing during this whole time. And just to go off a little bit more, what I was saying is like being your own advocate, like no one's going to read your mind, and they'll tell you that you have to be able to kind of step out of your boundaries, because I don't like asking questions either because it makes it seem like I'm not paying attention or I didn't do research before applying for the job. Like they expect you to ask questions, and when you take the time to do that, they know that you care about being there. And so like being really intentional about that, I think is really important moving forward. And I would say going virtual too, it really pushes people to communicate more. You're not really used to that. So I would suggest not to always just be afraid and just push yourself out of that comfort zone, because everyone has their own responsibilities. Everyone's a full-time professional. So if you're able to take the time to do that, they'll set the time to give answers to you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Maria. Anna, that's a really good question. Anybody on the call want to speak to that, of kind of specific ways that you can gauge the budget situation when you're being interviewed? Any interview pros on this chat?
Well, I think when you go into a position, you'll have some foresight on if you will be managing a budget directly. And I think that's what you should be focusing on, your clarification questions first and foremost. If you're going into a coordinator role, do you have full oversight over a specific aspect of the budget? Are you responsible for the equipment replacement? Are you responsible for the staff budget? How is that budget broken up? So really identifying what areas you're responsible for, and then beyond that responsibility, what is that autonomy? I can say I oversee my whole budget, and I use my coordinator to help oversee our spending, but I have the overall responsibility, and that's just how University of Arizona is currently structured. So they'll help make recommendations with me, but I'm the one that oversees it day to day. So really figuring out what those responsibilities are going to be, And then just being honest with your experience. So if you're in a GA role and you're in your first year, can you be part of the budget build process for the upcoming year? Can you be in those conversations now? Those are going to be really helpful as you're projecting out budgets for the future. The biggest surprise for me is that sometimes when we're talking about the budget, it's day to day or just for that academic year. But then there's times like with COVID, and I've had it before COVID, where they say, can you project out some type of spending budget over the next 5+ years, which expands when you might even be in that position. So really trying to figure out what those processes are in place right off the bat. So I would ask questions like, what part of the budget do I oversee? What is the autonomy? What is the timeline process? Are there historical records on budget spending from past years? What does that projection process look like? So is your budget review process going to start in January and go through May, or is it going to start in April and end in May? So what can you be doing that whole time that you're in a position? Because the budget's going to be either the first thing you do or the last thing you do. So I started in June. And so the first thing I had to do was a budget report for the whole year that I wasn't in my position, which is really difficult to do. And I wish I would have asked, like, what are some projects I'll be doing my first 30 days, which I never asked. And so with everything in your budget, you're going to have different levels of oversight. And so really just clarifying that, and then where are your competencies to that point.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Drake. And Anna, if I can give my response to your question, there's a lot of different ways, because there's the job side of the budget, and then there's like, how does the budget impact me? And is it ever going to come up organically? Probably not, because there's 1,001 ways that budgets can get done. There's a lot of people on this call, and every school has a different way of doing it. So the onus is kind of on you to ask the question. But one of the questions that I actually learned from a Region 3 student lead on is, every interview that I've gone into, one of the questions I ask is, how stable is the funding for this position? That's kind of a generic way of asking the question. And then you also have an idea of, is my position funding based through fees? Is it through auxiliary? Like all those kind of things. And that can open up that kind of discussion, because it's not necessarily asking like, how am I getting paid? Like, what's the budget situation like? How much money do you manage? Those are a lot more of like, if you have done your research, you might have been able to find those out. So it's all about developing that conversation to just make sure that you're making the most informed decision on where you want to go and how much experience you need to succeed there.
I think Courtney makes a really good point about how different they're going to be. I mean, I can speak to one of the interview processes that I'm in. The director, he called me and was so transparent. He said, like, as of right now, this money is guaranteed for next fiscal year, but that could change tomorrow. He said this university is having to do things that it's never had to do before. So as of right now, this position will be funded next year, but don't be surprised should I have to call you next week and tell you that funding is being reallocated somewhere else. So just, if they don't bring it up, just ask for their transparency and honesty, and hopefully you find people that will give that to you, because that's ultimately the kind of people, hopefully, that you want to work for, someone who's going to be open and honest with you.
Awesome. We got about 5 minutes left. So if anybody else has some of those tips and tricks that we would have liked to know when we were young pros, now we can share it with our future young pros that are on the call. There's lots of good information on this call. It's just dying to get out. So Cassie asked a good question of, what's the best interview question for an entry-level job in NIRSA? Anybody have a go-to interview question they'd like to share?
I like to ask how you measure the success of your mission through your assessment process, because NIRSA is so forward with your like they're so mission focused, and I think a lot of departments are that way, but I've found a lot of places I've interviewed don't know what their mission are, or they say this is their mission, but they don't measure it ever. So if you're somebody that wants to be in a mission driven organization, that's always a question that I like to ask, because I like it to be more than something that's just on the website.
Thank you, Drake.
It's not my favorite question, but I think I got really good advice from someone once to find out what people wish would be different in a job, and trying to find a better way to phrase that besides what do you not like about it is asking if there was something you could change, what would it be? And I think that gives some inquiry into what they would like to strive to, or just a little bit more about the limits or barriers that might exist in a department or university as a whole. So that was something that I asked a second year when looking at jobs, and it made a difference in kind of what I was able to get from people.
Thank you for sharing that, Tess.
Whenever I've been being interviewed for a position, I always make a point to ask about what challenges I might expect to face going into it. Gives you an idea of what may have taken place before you got there. It also can give you an idea of what some of the differences might be if you're going from a school with less than 6,000 students to interviewing at one that has 60,000. What might that look like for you? So asking those kinds of questions and keeping it kind of broad of what might be different, what can I expect, can cover a lot of ground and give you an idea of how that fit is going to be for you if you get that job.
Thank you, Shana. We've got about 2 minutes left. Comments, 1 or 2 comments.
One question I've always kind of gone back to when I was interviewing is, how do you view yourself as an extension of your university? It's no secret that when it comes to campus recreation, no matter what the campus is, you're kind of the crown jewel of it, because it's another place for hangouts, for students to get better physically, mentally, socially, and all that stuff. So when I was doing my interviews, I love to ask that question, because it would definitely, how they would answer it would show me how much pride they have, not only for their job, but for their university, whether they went there as students, whether they worked there or not.
Thank you for sharing that, Michael. Great point. One last question to bring us home. No? Awesome. Well, I do kind of want to finish with one last thing. Maria kind of took the words right out of my mouth, but obviously we want to say thank you for all for joining us today, but specifically to the students that are on this call. Just know that everything is going to work out. NIRSA will thrive and grow, and we are excited for you to join us if and when that happens. Nobody's career path is perfect. It's not linear, and this will be a great story for you to share with me at a future NIRSA annual conference, and I can't wait to hear it. So with that being said, I will stop being in the way of your weekend. I'm the last thing between you and the weekend, so from Cheyanne and I, thank you for joining us for today's roundtable. Bye.